If what you want is a bigger life, and if you know what that bigger life means to you, then the natural outgrowth of that is figuring out how to scale. And so multifamily is just that. And it's fun.
Welcome back to the Mark Faris Experience. I'm your host, Mark Faris. Today, we're going to be talking with Shannon Aronson. Shannon has a really great story here. She started as a real estate agent. She worked her way up, and she now owns 3 Keller Williams offices in the United States. So basically, Shannon's going to be telling you about the area that she's in, but she sells, her brokerages, the brokerage sells about $2 billion of real estate each and every year, oversees 650 agents. And she also runs a real estate investing firm as well. So she owns, we'll just say, a lot of real estate. So currently right now, she has about 137 million in assets under management, about 784 doors. So we're in for a real treat today. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, well, you know, we have something in common here. We both love investing in real estate, and we both started as real estate agents as well. So maybe you could share with the listeners a little bit about your backstory and what started this entrepreneurial, we'll say, passion and journey that you're on.
Yeah, well, like a lot of real estate agents, I find people say, I never really wanted to be a realtor. I didn't grow up wanting to be a realtor, and the same is true for me as well. I was in a different unrelated career before that. I used to be a psychotherapist, and same as a lot of other people, it was that little tiny book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that got me thinking. So I had just had my third child. He was probably 2 years old. I stayed up all night long and read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and within a couple of weeks, I bought my first investment property, which was a flip, and my second investment property, which was a buy and hold. And I thought that was just the best game in town. And I didn't ever want to be a realtor because who would want to do that, I thought at that time. But I kept with a strategy of flip one, take the profits, buy one and hold, flip another one, take the profits, buy one and hold. And after some time, I said to myself, oof, it's a lot of money to pay the realtor. I might as well get that real estate license. And also, in addition to the commission that I was paying out, which now, of course, I'm happy to pay realtors their commission, more importantly, it's just hard to find a deal sometimes. And I needed to get closer. I needed to get a front row seat to all the information out there to find deals. So that was the reason that I got my real estate license, and originally intended only to do investing. But then, like a lot of people, I sort of got hooked, and it's almost a healthy addiction because it's so exciting to help people find a house, and that's usually the most important thing going on in someone's life, right? At the time, if they're having a baby, that might be more important. If they're getting married, it might be more important. If they've got health problems, it might be more important. Other than that, when you're in the middle of selling a house and buying a house, it's so important. And I think there's a very cool adrenaline rush that goes along with helping people through that time. And then, a little bit competitive. And I decided, instead of just doing my own deals, if I was going to go to work in a sales office, I wanted to be top of the heap. So then I decided it was time to learn systems and models and be very purposeful about what I was going to do to grow my business. And here I am 20-something years later, helping other people who have the same passion that I do to really build cool real estate businesses.
So how long into being an agent did you say, okay, I'm going to get and flip over to, say, like the management and ownership side of it? Was it kind of a slow, gradual shift over, or was it, how many years into it did you make?
Yeah, no, it was a very, what is it, Mark Twain, slowly, very slowly, then suddenly. It was one of those. When I started selling real estate, I was 40-ish. I had 3 little kids. I actually had been going through a divorce, and we live in a very expensive area, not very far outside of New York City. And so I had made a promise to myself that I would do whatever I needed to keep my kids living where we lived and in the life that they wanted. And so this gig sort of enabled me to do that. And then along the way, I fell in love with it. And then along the way, I was enjoying it and growing a big business. When my youngest child graduated from high school, I literally had kind of a eureka moment in 1 minute. That I wanted to sell my business, and I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to go into being a managing partner with my partners to run these businesses, but I knew I wanted to change, and that's one of the cool things about real estate, right? You can zig and zag and do different things. So I had this moment as my last child would be leaving home. I wanted a little bit more freedom of time, and so I sold my business, which I was exceedingly happy with what that did for my life. And then opportunity found me. I was invited by my partners to come on board and take a managing partner role. And then subsequently together we bought a third brokerage.
Amazing. So what was it that helped you learn the systems and models? You had said that a little bit earlier. So you were selling and then you said, you know what, I'm going to start learning the systems and models, which is like that kind of business mind standpoint. Was there a certain book, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad got you into real estate investing? But was there a book, or did you speak to somebody, or how'd you start going down that path to be able to shift your mind from like operator to, okay, I'm going to own a business?
Yeah. So there's three things really. One is called necessity. You know, I said, all right, I actually need to make a lot of money. So maybe instead of trial and error and guessing, maybe I should come up with a plan here. Because I happen to be in a Keller Williams brokerage, there's a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, which I'm sure you've heard of. And I read the book and I said to myself, well, I can try some trial and error and try to come up with a few ideas, or I could simply follow a model and a system that other people told me works. And I just decided that was probably a more surefire way to do it. So I very closely followed the models of that The Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. And then the third thing I would say is a guy named Dan Sullivan. I'm sure you've heard of him as well. He writes a lot about entrepreneurialism. I also, for many years, was in a coaching program with him. It's called Strategic Coach. And it really teaches entrepreneurs how to think. And that really transformed my brain in so many ways. And, you know, if somebody is out there and they don't read, if you're in real estate and you haven't read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, you don't think about it, read it. And if you haven't started reading almost everything that Dan Sullivan writes, I'd say that now is a good time.
Yeah. His book, Who Not How, was just so well done. And then, you know, the whole 10X was it easier than 2X? That was another one that just really sharp. So 100% recommend that as well. And, you know, going back to the necessity side of it. So you were going through a separation and it was like, okay, I want to stay in the area and my kids need me. And it was like, it was a must at that point for you. Can you take us through, like, what was that like going through? Because there's some listeners out there right now that there's like feelings of hopelessness, right? You know,
I had those. I know those.
Can you share, like, in the moment, how you, I mean, that's tough. Like, I would just say that, you know, I'm just so blessed. My wife, she's like, her and I started the business and she was very ingrained in the operations when we started and throughout many years. And then, you know, it got to the point where she could step back and she really makes sure that the house is solid, but she is going full time. We have 3 boys as well, same as yourself. And she is like, so like that support there. And I just think, to be able to do what I'm doing and then to be able to get to look after, you know, the 3 boys and manage a house and have all the financial pressure and it's just
a lot.
Can you take us through what were you feeling in that moment, at those moments, and what helped you push through rather than that? I know it was a must, you just had to get it done, but can you help us? Because there's some listeners that are exactly there right now.
Sure. No, I think they're great questions. A lot of things go into that. I mean, I have a personality type also that I grew up in the Midwest in like a don't feel sorry for yourself, work hard kind of a way. And so there were some voices in my ear that said, "Oh, you're getting a divorce. You don't want to grow your business now. Wait until you have a settlement And and my ex-husband happens to be a lovely man. We're good friends. It just wasn't right for us to be married for the rest of our life. And I was not of the mindset that sitting around seeing how much you could get from someone else was a better strategy than seeing how you could rely on yourself to build something really cool and really exciting that, oh, by the way, you feel super proud of. So part of that was mindset. I think a lot of it was like I wasn't prepared to fail. I wasn't prepared to lose self-respect. And I was only going to have self-respect if I built a career that I was really proud of, if I built a life that I felt proud of as far as my 3 boys go, and then I had a life that I wanted, and I could do things that gave me fulfillment and enrichment, and all the things that go with that, right? So, the first part of it was mindset, and then it happened right after my then husband and I separated. I had a bunch of health problems, which have all turned out to be fine now, 17 years later, but I actually became really sick. And so now I'm really sick with 3 boys. And the story gets a little worse. Remember when Bear Stearns collapsed and the subprime mortgage market went away, and there's someone you are now talking to who made her living flipping houses because the banks would give anyone money? Oh, by the way, that all went away as well.
Right.
And at the same time, when the stock market really took a huge dive, then I was overly invested in one thing, which is a whole long story in itself, probably not for a podcast. Literally overnight, it's not an exaggeration to tell you that I lost everything.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was really, really, really dark. But if you don't have a choice and you don't believe you have a choice and you want to respect yourself, then you get up and you keep figuring stuff out. And so that's when I just decided I didn't have time to figure stuff out. I was going to have to follow the tracks, the clues left by other people. And that's why I always, go back to systems and models. Other people do it. So I had to figure out a way to get that done pretty quickly. And then, people's voice are in your ears in positive ways too. And I remember people saying, Shannon, people that are successful are not afraid to ask other people for advice. They're not afraid to ask someone else who's really successful out for lunch. And that was actually easy for me for whatever reason. But a good friend of mine, her name is Sue Adler. She's she's one of the biggest real estate agents in the country. But I was a little nobody then. And I remember saying, well, people say you should ask somebody like that out for lunch. And I did. And you know what she said? She said yes. And we had lunch. And I learned a lot, and we're still friends to this day. And so it was hard. It was dark. Everything was gone, and I just dug out. And it took a long time, but I dug out. And at this point in life, my life exceeds my every expectation in every category.
How long did it take you? Thanks for sharing that. How long? So somebody's in that moment now. They hear that encouragement from you, which is beautiful, and that the sun did come up for you. For them, they're like, okay. For you, how long did that
It's a good question.
Or you had, like, there was some hope where you're starting to see some momentum happening, where there was like, it wasn't like that, the world is collapsing on you, where you started to see some peak of sunlight coming in your life?
Well, it's funny because it's so subjective. I'm one of those people who probably thrives a little too much on the angst of the grind. Like if I don't keep running, it's right behind me. As of the last few years, I've tried to start telling myself that maybe it's not right behind me. I'm fine. So that kind of drives me, but it took, it goes in stages, right? Like first, how am I literally going to manage? And then how am I going to manage? And then, yeah, look, okay, it would be great to take my kids on nice vacations again. And then, it grows. But I would say by the time I sold my business, which was 5 years ago, I had left behind the world of, feeling like every day was horrible. So I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7 years. I've heard, as we talk about Gary Keller, I've heard him say that you can be anywhere you want to be within 3 to 5 years. I might have been a slow mover. I'll bet it was more like 5 to 7. But cool stuff has happened since then. So that's awesome.
Well, and, the environment it shifted dramatically at that point as well, which, of course, that impacts time as well. But you not giving up during that period and building that resiliency. And you said something as well, like always kind of in the back of your mind. I shared this in the past as well, but I heard Patrick Bet-David saying that whenever there's any sort of like decision, or even his mindset is like, there's 51% optimism and there's 49% is like paranoia. And is like, he thinks that's like a healthy dynamic.
Yeah, I do too. I think
right?
that's a safe place to be.
Yeah, because I mean, when I first started, it's like, oh yeah, all real estate when I was younger, it's like, you just buy real estate and it always goes up. But, as you start to navigate different markets, you realize like, actually, with real estate and buying real estate, like all of a sudden, like buy for cash flow, that starts to make a whole lot more sense. Fix your debt long term with these larger assets, because it could go up. It's doesn't always stay down interest rates. And you can start to see like all of a sudden, you got these events happening and how it can impact you. And then the operations team, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well, getting into the multifamily space. Like, you have good operators and you have great ones and you have really poor ones, and you can take an asset that is the same and, get completely different results based on how you run the deals, just like a business, right?
Right. And you can even have good operators and a good asset, and it still isn't a straight line. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't go completely straight.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I love that. The necessity, and copy existing models that work. So reading a book in your industry of somebody that was successful, and then that's amazing. You dove into it and then you started acting on it, which I think is just so rare. Reading is quite rare, but reading to implement and then execute what you learn is even more rare as well.
There's something about that too, to circle back to Dan Sullivan again. I think this is not talked about enough. We, especially those of us that grind and work really hard, I think don't take enough time to have some white space, some blank space, so that you can think about things that you read or things that you talk about or things that you dream about or your goals. And I think the implementation doesn't actually come during the grind. It comes during the thinking. You have to have some time to think about what you want to do. And Dan Sullivan's very big on, you actually need to schedule that and time block that, just like everything else that's important. And I mean, I fall off that wagon sometimes. And when I do, I notice it. It's probably not a coincidence. I always say that most successful year, I don't know if this is true anymore. It was true for a while. The most successful year I ever had in terms of earning was the year that I took the most vacations.
Mm.
And I read on my vacations, and I think, and I ponder, and
Why do you think that is? Why do you think? Because I've heard that. I don't know how many times as well. When you want to get busy, go on vacation, right? When you want on vacation, then everybody's going to start calling you. Like, why do you think that works out that way so consistently?
I think it's probably a little bit just what you manifest, but you have to take care of yourself. Like I would always say, you would never wake up in the morning and expect your phone to work if you didn't charge it at night. And we have a longer battery life than our iPhones, but it's not unlimited. And also, I think the first thing to go for a lot of people is creativity, and creativity in problem solving. Like, I'm not talking about going out and painting, but maybe it's that too. But creativity in problem solving, and then creativity about standing back, looking at the horizon and figuring where you want to go next. That stuff requires some battery and some energy and some restorative time. So I personally think that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's really good for sure. So you make a lot of decisions on a day-to-day basis. So you're overseeing a lot. There's a lot of people that are looking up to you. And I really believe that businesses and, real estate investing overall, your results are, to me, the outcome of the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis, right? So quality decisions become very important. So are there any principles or filters that you filter your decisions through to be able to make quality decisions?
Yeah, I think we all know there's just too much out there. There's too many opportunities. I realize some newer agents might not believe this. I'm sure you do, and they will. When you're first starting out, you think there's just not enough opportunities, and how are you going to find them? And as you get busy and you realize if you actually do the not very sexy, glamorous tasks that you're supposed to do if you want to be a realtor, you 100% will have enough opportunities. So first, do the activities that are going to get you opportunities. Then once you get opportunities, you need to create some more of that white space time to think, what are the kinds of opportunities that I really want? What are my ideal clients? What are the ideal types of people that I like to work with? For me, I'm always harping on agents to please put some real estate investing in your real estate life. So, think about, well, what is it that I could afford right now? Where could I find some money? How could I get in? And then you got to block some time in your calendar to focus on, first, it's learning, and second of all, then doing the steps. So I think it's about being very, very purposeful with your time and making decisions about what that means. Like, what do I want to spend my time on? And then how am I going to be purposeful about doing that?
Yeah, that's really good. And when Shannon's saying real estate agents, if you're listening and if you're in a different industry, these are all very applicable. Everything that Shannon's saying there is very applicable to whatever business that you're in. That think time and to be able to make quality decisions is definitely imperative for sure. So, Shannon, you are in real estate. You're overseeing. You own a number of different offices. Over 600 agents, so you oversee a lot of people. What was it that got you into multifamily investing? And I know you're doing some other things as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that transition there? And what was it that initially grabbed you into it? And then maybe what sustained you through, the last number of years you being in the multifamily investing space?
Yeah, there's so many things I love about talking about that. If you're entrepreneurial minded, you're always going to want to scale, right? So if you start, whether it's investing for yourself or selling clients to your houses or helping your clients invest, you learn the game. It's not really a magical game, right? You buy a piece of real estate and you invest it and you do due diligence and you find money, and some of that's equity and some of that's debt. Like the whole piece that you put together for one house at a time, surprisingly, is the same game when you buy 400 units. And every deal is a little different, whether it's one house for a single family client of yours or 400 units that you're buying with multiple investors. It's about learning how to problem solve all along the way, learning how to listen, learning how to negotiate. So I think that the interest in doing these multifamily just came from an inherent entrepreneurial need to scale. And, all this, as I'm answering you, what I think of is Dan Sullivan, of course. It's easier to 10X than 2X. If I could, actually, with some partners supposed to be closing on 400 units here in a week or two, that's the ultimate 10X, right? So it's not a lot harder. You have to find, as I said, you have to find money, you have to find debt, you have to find a property, you have to find a deal, you have to know how to work your numbers. It goes back to the core and what you want and goal setting. And I realize not everyone is wired that way. It's hard for people like me, and I think you, to possibly understand that everyone isn't wired that way. But if what you want is a bigger life, and if you know what that bigger life means to you, then the natural outgrowth of that is figuring out how to scale. Mm-hmm. And so multifamily is just that. And it's fun. Mm-hmm. And it's doing things in other places sometimes. I mean, I live in New Jersey, which isn't a particularly friendly tenant state.
Yeah.
Landlord state, to say the least. And so it made sense to go to places like Savannah and Charleston, where I do a lot of these. And that to me is also just a little adventure and fun. And real estate as a career is the ticket to so many things. And I do think fun and adventure are among them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you can't argue with the facts that 90% of millionaires use real estate to get there, right?
Yeah.
And so when the listener, they're hearing you and they're saying 400 units, they're like, oh my goodness, like how on earth would something like that even be taken down? So can you maybe just take down, like, just super high level, how you'd even take down a 400 unit building? Like, okay, we get BlackRock and all these $1 billion REITs are going in and buying these properties. But, you and I and, the listeners out there,
little schmoes.
we're like the everyday investors, right? And so can you maybe just explain at a high level, how it works and how, somebody that's listening could potentially even, take down a property like that?
Yeah. My answer is going to be a little oversimplified, and it'll make sense to some and not others. When you're in a sales career of any kind, we all know that you live and die by relationships. So if you just sent me out tomorrow on my own and said, Shannon, how about Cleveland? Go find a multifamily. The first thing I would try to do is develop a team of people to have relationships with that are going to get me half the way there. Again, who, not how. I don't know anyone in Cleveland. I've never even actually been to Cleveland. So what would I do? I'd find out who owns other large properties. I would certainly talk to property management companies and find out who some of the owners are and do they have any owners that might be interested in selling. I'd probably also look to see, are there some other syndication groups that are functioning there. I would try to find an opportunity first while working alongside trying to put together a team. But oftentimes finding the team of other people is going to help you find the deal. And I think the other thing is, are you good at operating? Are you good at underwriting? Are you good at, do you have relationships in the credit world? For me, because as a real estate agent, I always knew that my business was going to live and die by my database. I built a really big database over the years selling real estate. And the thing is, I believe in what you just said, that, 90% of all very wealthy people invest in real estate. So I have a database of people who are, my age-ish, some older, some younger. Wouldn't they want the opportunity to invest in real estate? So given that I have a pretty thick Rolodex of people in real estate who can help find deals, it's really cool that I can take some of those deals to people that want to invest money. So I knew that was going to be a really important part of what I could bring to the table, which is bringing people who would like to invest in real estate and their cash to the table. So I just needed to find relationships with people that fell into all the other parts of the team, as you mentioned, operations, deal finding.
Yeah, really well answered there. And, if you're listening and you're like, that word syndication, it's essentially what it is you get a number of different investors that pool their money together to go and buy a large asset. So that's versus like a real estate investment trust, which is really essentially the same thing, but it's done in a way that you're basically partnering up. And so you're going after these larger assets. That's what syndication is. And so pretty standard thing. And Shannon, I don't know about you, but for me, it was out of necessity, because we had thousands of investors through the years that would be able to come to us and say, yeah, listen, I'd like to invest in real estate, and we could find them a cash flowing property. So you could go buy a single family home and it would make more income from the rents than all the expenses, and they'd have a little left over. But when interest rates doubled, and with the other problem with rent control in the markets that we were in just north of Toronto, it became a point where you couldn't raise rents anymore, especially through COVID. There was 0%, and you were allowed to raise rents by 0%, and then now it's even 2.5%. And then to get a non-paying tenant out, it's like 12 to 18 months. Investors would come to us and it's hard to find these deals. And so you may be listening to this and say, you know what, and that's the same story for me in the market that I'm in right now. It's not as plentiful to find real estate deals. And so what Shannon's saying, and myself as well, like, we've been able to build these vehicles so that investors can actually come in and partner with us on these assets that are not only larger, and there's more upside and lower downside when you get into more multifamily units, but there's no rent control in these markets down south, and they can actually cash flow. So has that been your experience, Shannon?
Yeah, I guess when you ask how you get into it, there's another important part of the story there's two important parts of the story that I left out. Number one, it's one thing with our own money, but with other people's money, I also spent a couple of years really just diving in and learning about, as you're saying, syndications. And I think that's actually really important. I started investing as just an investor in some of those deals so that I had access to really dig in and look at the underwriting and understand them. And then the second thing we did, I actually have a son who also works for a major banking institution in New York City as an asset manager. And he and I partner on some of these. And what we did was run models after models and spreadsheets after spreadsheets to really analyze areas. We wanted to look for areas that are landlord friendly. That's easy. You can Google the top 10 list. But then you really want to look at things where the average income is growing, where the population is growing, where there's not too much building. Like, there is a bunch of research that you want to do at the beginning so that you can decide on the areas that you want to be in. So that was an important part of getting started. Everything else you said makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No, it's so smart. I mean, at the beginning, definitely, investing as a limited partner at the beginning, I think is one of the best things to do, and to do your research and get out and talk to people as well. Shannon, can you talk a little bit about how important, we spoke briefly with this at the beginning, but how important the operations team is on ground zero? Because, you've seen now a number of deals, and, I'm sure you've seen some really good and some things that, I'd probably, maybe we'd do things a little different with, the on the ground operations team. Like, how important is that in these multifamily deals? And anything you can share on that?
Yeah, it's so important. And I think, look, you and I are happy people and we love what we do. So it comes across that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. By the way, I think it is. But it's work. Yeah. Like, it's not easy. It's not foolproof. Even if you're a fabulous operator, you have, a management person in one building that isn't good. And before you can fire him, you've got 3 bad Google reviews. And, even though you're in an area where there's a moratorium on new builds, there's always ways around that. And all of a sudden you have 400 new units in your area, and that can drive prices down. Like,
yeah,
you have to be constantly vigilant all the time. It's a little bit like whack-a-mole. There's always something. And so it's not like buy a piece of real estate and get rich slowly and it's easy. It's not. You have to be diligent. And the diligence comes from, again, who is on your team. And that's just not the team that you're partners with, but the people that you hire in all sorts of roles. And just like you and I running real estate businesses, that's the same. Like, you have to be able to build a team, keep a team motivated, engaged, hold a team accountable, make sure you inspect what you expect so that when things are going off the tracks a little, you don't get too far off the tracks before you pull it back. That all comes with management and people skills. And make no mistake, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Well, and these projects in general, they can go from like 2 to 5 years, right? So if you start on the wrong foot, it's hard to kind of change the trajectory of the ship. And so
it turns slowly.
Yeah, exactly. So when we started, we actually, to more so fire a bullet before firing a cannon, we went in and I had partnered with a couple of other groups. So we got to see kind of how they operated the deal. And then we went and assembled our own team. And we found with our assets, there's like this 28-day transformation that we found really set the tone. And so what we do is the very first thing, we go in and we change out the property manager to somebody who's like friendly. And we actually go in, fly in and interview them as a final interview to make sure that they have like a friendly face and they can actually speak with people. And then we offer these 3 guarantees that if there's a death or they lose their job within that lease period, they can actually cancel their lease. We offer this up front. Okay, it sounds kind of weird, but I'll tell you where we're going with this. So would they move in within the first 30 days? If they don't like what they see, they can cancel their lease. And if we don't if we don't fix a maintenance request within 48 hours, unless we have to order a part, we give them a concession. And so we tell them these 3 guarantees up front. The interesting thing is that it holds us accountable as the managing team. And they're like, oh my goodness, this is like amazing. It takes all the stress and relief off of it. And if they lose their job, we're okay to that's okay that
Let
they
them out.
like let them out. They lost their job. And then we go in within 28 days, we do all maintenance on the outside, repaint the buildings, all new landscaping, amenities. And then we do leasing center. We actually stage it, which I was shocked. I was shocked, Shannon, that a lot of them aren't staged, the model suites and then the leasing center. And then what we do is all new monument sign, amenities, and then we host an event. And the event is something that we actually fly out and we get to meet the residents and barbecue and we cast a vision with their culture and mission. And we found after that, like the people are like, oh my goodness, this is different. And we're seeing like these Google reviews coming through. And we just found that changing the tone from a culture standpoint is something that what we learned in business, like, this in your brokerage is culture is like everything. And we've been able to kind of tie that in, but it goes back to, we had to learn that the hard way by kind of seeing what not to do as much, pretty much with a couple of groups. And then we were able to implement this and it changed the return metrics from on the renewals. All of a sudden now they're like, okay, no problem. I'll pay that renewal and plus some. So we're getting a projected pro forma renovated rents without even renovating in a lot of cases.
That's great. Well, what I heard in all that, first of all, was that you had a system and a model. You came in and you told, and I was scribbling some notes here on the side, but you made some decisions. You have a system and a model, and now everyone on your whole team gets to follow it. And that sets a culture, not just with the residents, but also with your team. This is how we operate. That's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, and it starts with, I've people on the team that are a lot smarter than me. So I'm maybe the guy in the name on the company, but definitely they do the genius work. And so going back to productivity here, so habits and routines. So you've obviously, from being at that low that you were in, and then you basically, we'll call you the rising phoenix, and you grew. Were there any like routines or habits that you implemented that you still do today that was like, okay, there was a lot of fruit that came from me doing this on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. It's going back a little to the beginning when you were talking about being in a partnership with your wife. I'll say a couple things that are gender stereotypical, but a lot of the things that came from being a mom, running a house, and at that point, then I became a single mom. I knew I had to do all those things, but I also knew I wanted to build a big business. And so I think what a lot of people do, especially in real estate, because they think that's flexible schedule, right? You can't do all the things in both sides of that equation, of home life and work. So I made a decision very early on that leverage was going to be super important to me, and I was going to use it everywhere I could as soon as I could afford to add more. So I made a decision right when I started building my real estate world that I could either spend a little bit more money on house help, babysitting help, or an assistant at work. And I decided that I really wanted to be home as much as possible with my kids. And so I went a little lighter on childcare, beefed up on home care, but I hired an assistant at work before a few people were looking at me like I was crazy because I wasn't doing that much business. But to the habits and the systems and the dedication, I knew that there were going to be certain time that I needed to do the activities that I had just promised myself I would do to build the business I wanted. And so I had to create space to do that without some of the interruptions. I see a lot of, again, talking to real estate agents, I see so many of them not doing that the right way. When I'll meet with an agent, sometimes at the end of the year, we talk about their year and then we talk about what they want to do going forward. When we get to the end of the next year, every single time they didn't hit their goals or they didn't do what they said they're going to do, it's a conversation about those aren't even, most of the time, the things you didn't do aren't even things you should be doing. You need to hire someone else where that would be their genius and they should be doing those things. And people have a lot of yeah buts around that as it relates to money. My thought on that is, I use this example a lot, but if you go out for dinner tonight with your wife and you spend $200 on a dinner, that homeowner or that restaurant owner does not put that $200 in their pocket like it's their money. It's not their money, right? They have all those other expenses. I think particularly in the real estate agent world, people take a commission check and they go live on that. It's not really all their money. There are expenses related to building a business that a lot of people, particularly early on, don't think about, because you cannot have a schedule that matches your goals unless you leverage all the things that you shouldn't be doing. And that comes from figuring out what are the things that only you can do. Usually that's direct face-to-face with clients, or if it's deal hunting, whatever that is, versus a lot of the other things that somebody else would be better than you at doing anyway.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Leverage, what a great routine to be, or habit to get into, thinking leverage. And where I really learned that for me was we're down in Florida right now, but we still have our place up just north of Toronto. But north of Toronto we get a lot of snow. But I'll tell you, when we hired somebody to come in at 4:30 in the morning and do the driveway and remove the snow, and I'd go out at 5 or 6 or whatever I was leaving, and it was done. I'll tell you, like, oh, that changed. I grew up on a farm, right? So for me, it was like, same with cutting the grass. Like, do it on your own. Right? Don't hire somebody to do it. It's like, we'll buy a tractor for that and get her done. But I'll tell you, once I saw that, I was like, I'm all in. I was just trying to, let's get somebody to climb the ladder to go put the Christmas lights up. I'm like, that's a great investment.
That's a great investment. But then what I'm sure you do naturally is then you have to hold yourself accountable to those 2 hours that you just bought back.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with those that is purposeful? Is it 2 extra hours that you're going to spend with your kids? Great, if that's what you want. Is it 2 extra hours that you're going to call 10 more clients or look for 10 more deals? But you have to be purposeful with it.
Yeah, there's real wisdom in what you just said there. And Dan Martell, he wrote this book, Buy Back Your Time, and he just harps on what you just said in a big way. So there's real wisdom in that when you get that time back, use it very intentionally versus like, oh, I'm going to go watch Netflix right now.
Exactly. No Candy Crush.
Yeah. And Netflix, I mean, from time to time, if you want to go watch, it's fine. But, maybe you start working in the middle of the day and, you're talking about not hitting your goals at the end of the year. I'm sure.
Then you're probably not listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably have some of those conversations at the end of the year. It's like, I don't know why I'm hitting my goals. And they're like, well, tell me what your day looks like. Well, I come in the office 3 days a week this year. And it's like, well, you want full-time results, like maybe come into the office.
5 days might be nice.
Yeah.
The other expression I like, and it's not mine, but if someone else looked at your calendar, would they know what your goals were? If they looked at your calendar for last year, if you're lead generating, whatever that means to you, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day, or 3 days a week, or I don't care what it is, does your calendar match your goals? It either does or it doesn't.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. I wrote that down there. That's really good. So if somebody else looks at your calendar, would they know what your goals are? Would they know what your priorities are? That's really good. Because if you put in the calendar, it's going to get done, right? Where you spend your time is where your true priorities are, which is really good. Well, what stresses you out? Like, what would you say would be your biggest stressor as a business owner, investor, mom? What would you say is your biggest stressor in life?
Well, I'm like your other friend that you mentioned earlier. I almost like it. So I'm always going to find something to be stressed about because it motivates me. As far as the multifamily stuff, hands down, just never want to lose a penny for anyone or, not hit our pro forma goals. So, as I said, it's hard work, right? It's not easy, but that gets me out of bed every day. I like the stress from trying new things and knowing that you're a little afraid because you have never done it before. I'm just in the process of developing 63 units, which I haven't done before. I haven't built from the ground up. And so, well, that stresses me out. What if conditions change? What if the ability to get money changes? So change is stressful, but I guess as you get older, you also get the confidence that, all right, where the forks in the road come, we'll figure it out. We always figured it out before, but it's stressful. I stress about realtors that work in our firm not hitting their goals, not fulfilling their life mission. And I actually really care. And we have a great team where I am, and we're so happy to help people. But when I see people that are struggling, that stresses me out a lot.
It's a very consistent theme I see, Shannon, with top producers. The ones that go far is they have this deep, we'll say commitment, but it's even more than a commitment. It's like this deep underlying like gravitational pull to not disappoint people. And that to me, I think is such like a foundational piece to great customer service. Is it like irks you? Like, I don't know about you. You said it earlier about a Google review coming in. That wasn't a good, like if you do something and a bad Google review comes in, like for me, that's like the ultimate slap in the face. It's like, how did we fail here? It's like, and this like deep. So do you think that's something that can be, trained, or do you think somebody just like innate has that in their personality?
I don't like my answer on that one.
Well, that's what the podcast is all about. You speak.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's the people that I'm running through my head. I think the people that I know that feel that way always did. I mean, I'll tell you, my husband's a dentist. He and his son are in practice together for a long time. They have a very big dental practice. And the thing that bothers him the most is if someone on the team made a mistake that inconvenienced or annoyed or, wasn't in the patient's best interest. It just hurts him, like, I don't know why he got that. He's the same way, right? Like if you see a Google review from some person who maybe just seems a little wacky, and it was just like, that happens too, right? You get weirdos sometimes that I can live with those. When you know that your DNA is on it and there was something you didn't do right, oh, that burns. So can you learn it? I don't know. It's a great question.
Well, hey, to me, I'm in the camp of more so, I'm not going to put limits on anyone, but for me, if I'm going to bet on somebody, this is where, for me, where, the story is Darren Hardy. I don't know if you've ever, heard of Darren Hardy, but
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So he has this, he's like the modern day Napoleon Hill. And he was telling a story. He was meeting I believe it was the vice president of the Marriott. And so he flew in the night before, and he walked in, the bellman greeted him, was super friendly. And then he walked to the front desk, and the lady greeted him, super friendly, went upstairs, ordered room service, super friendly. Next day, he comes out and meets the vice president of the Marriott and said, "How on earth do you train everybody to be so friendly?" And he's like, I want to be able to teach that. He's like, everybody I met so far is friendly. How do you do it? And the vice president thinks about it for a minute, and he goes, well, we don't train people to be friendly. We hire
friendly people.
And then Gary's like, right. Oh, man. He's like, he didn't see it. And it just goes back to when when it comes down to people and making your selection, I don't want to bet on somebody that doesn't have that, right? And so when you're betting on anyone, sure, people can change, but, I'm in the same camp as you. Is most of the people that have that, they have like this deep yearning to want to please. And so when we hire, say, realtors, for example, or when we hire anyone, we look at their track record in life, and we look for three things when it comes to realtors. One, do they have a genuine love of people? Like, they don't just tell me, like, I'm seeing it in how they're operating today. It's not something I'm going to train. It's just they have it or they don't. The second is, are they willing to work hard? And so and not just like sometimes, it's just like they're doing it today, right? And then, are they willing to learn? Are they saying, yeah, I already know that? Or do they have, just like you, I mean, with development, you're learning something new. Your cup is always half full, and you're constantly curiosity and wanting to grow and learn. And I think that's something that I don't want to bet on somebody just getting that all of a sudden. Now, I'm not saying they can't get it. It's just, I'll bet on people that they're, and that's who's listening to the show here right now. People that are listening to the show, they want to learn, they want to grow, and they have this mindset. But I would just say, be mindful of who you're betting on. And I would say, don't bet. My recommendation, or my experience, whenever I've betted on somebody, that and tried to change them, it never worked out well. And so it's like marrying somebody and saying, I'm going to change you. It's the reality is like marry them for who they are.
I think that goes a long way, both in hiring and also even just who you spend your time with. Like I've become so purposeful. The same things that you're talking about wanting to have with who you hire, they're the same things I want in friendships and in all the relationships I have.
So good. No, that's great. So just moving on here. So there's so many things that entrepreneurs can invest in today. I mean, like for a real estate firm, we have to say no to 200 different apartment opportunities to find one. And so, but because we have that discipline, we can deliver phenomenal returns. But to help our listeners, how do you decide what to invest your money into so that, they can, the listeners can actually get good returns on their investments with so many different options out there today?
So we talking about in real estate or in general?
Just in general, any sort when they're making, let's just say they've invested in their businesses, they paid their taxes, they have, excess cash flow, and they're looking to invest that money somewhere. How can you help them make a decision on where to place that money?
Yeah, it makes sense. So first of all, I bet on people and relationships and systems and models so that you can research them. So there's a really great book called The Banker's Code, which I like. And that talks a lot about, it's a concept everybody talks about right now, but like becoming your own bank, but it takes it a little bit in a different way and puts systems and models behind it. And then if it's going to be real estate, if you're going to determine with whom you're going to invest, spend your time, do the research, ask all the questions you want, make sure you feel that somebody has domain expertise in that. And whether it's maybe if you have a person that helps you with financial stuff, it goes back to relationships. Don't expect that you're just going to give something to somebody and that's the end of it. You need to stay involved. You need to trust your gut on everything that you do in terms of investing. And I think most people don't spend enough time thinking about their money. So, if there's anybody on this call that doesn't track their net worth, I would say monthly is the right way to do it. If you take one thing from this call and you don't do that, you need to do that. Because otherwise, you wake up in the morning and you think, oh, this was my paycheck and this is how much I spent, and people stay forever in this cycle of feeling poor when oftentimes they're really not poor because some of their money just isn't cash flow. It's tied up with things that are healthy, like a mortgage, for instance. But you need to see that on paper. And then once you see that on paper, then you figure out what your healthy reserve is, both in your regular personal life and then also your business reserve. And then you get really clear on what money you have left. And then when you know what that war chest is, then you can go out and say, who do I trust? What are they investing in? What am I doing? How much of that do I want to be in real estate? How much of that do I want to be in the stock market? But don't just, we've all done it where you sort of wake up and you hear this really great stock tip and you buy it. And okay, if sometimes that's fun, like fine. But that should be the exception, not the rule. Make a plan, have a plan. Don't expect that you have a perfect plan. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a plan with, I do some private money lending. So how much of my net worth is going to be in private money lending? How much of it's going to be in the stock market? How much is going to be in real estate? I think it really goes back to that. Have a plan, do some due diligence, find some experts, trust your gut.
Yeah. No, great advice. And in today's environment, there's a lot of things happening. What would you say would be your biggest investing challenge that you're facing today?
Happy to say it. Too many opportunities.
Too many. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you do the kinds of things you and I are talking about today, you will get to a place where you have too many opportunities, and it's fun. So you need to be careful. You can't do everything. There are some people listening who think they don't have opportunities and they're never going to have enough. There are other people listening that understand what I'm saying. Like, if everything's an opportunity, then you need a system for how you're going to filter them. And again, I'd say there's no right system, but have one.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's, I think it was Steve Jobs said that he was more proud about the things that he didn't do than the things that he did do because he had so many opportunities coming at him, right? So, being wise what that is really important. Really great advice here. Shannon. So are we ready for the rapid fire part of the conversation? You ready to go with the 3 questions?
Ready to go.
Cool. All right. So you referenced some really good books here, but what would you say would be the biggest, like the book that made the biggest impact in your life? What would that be? Whether, business, wealth creation, or otherwise?
Yeah, if it's real estate as a real estate agent, it's definitively Millionaire Real Estate Agent. If it's real estate as an investor, it's basic 101, has to be Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, solid book. And you wrote a separate book as well, Cash Flow Quadrant. If you into that, I mean, all of his books are all great, Robert Kiyosaki. But one thing that really stuck with me, which is going through seeing that over the last couple of years with interest rates doubling, buy for cash flow. And an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Really good. So definitely dive in. And I'd say, Shannon, you kind of barely kind of mentioned it, but most real estate investors reference that book. So if you're thinking about getting into real estate investing, and I think that's why you chuckled at the beginning when you said,
well, it's so cliche, but it's true.
But I think if you haven't read it though, that should be like a screaming, like, go and read this, because that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, is the number one book that's changed the way that people think about investing, and it's changed their whole trajectory. It did for me too. I'll tell you, that book, I read that when I was 17, and that's what made me want to get into real estate. So I'll just say, if you haven't read the book, it'll just do yourself a favor and read it. Okay. I'll leave it off on that, but with like strong encouragement, please do it, because
strong.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah. All right. So second question is, how would others describe you in 3 words?
Problem solver, energetic, I would hope ethical.
And then final advice, whether it's for your younger self or an entrepreneur, maybe that's just starting off, what final advice would you want to give them?
Spend a lot of time figuring out what you want. And by a lot of time, it's not even as much as you'd think, but it's some purposeful time blocks. You, I'm sure, agree with me that just about everyone you know that knows what they want and is willing to work hard, they get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I know there's a lot of challenges out there, and there's a lot of excuses, and there's a lot of hardship. I've had my own, but if you figure out what you want, you'll figure out how to get it.
Yeah. Well, such wisdom there. Thank you so much. That was great talk there, Shannon. I really appreciate you coming on the show. How can listeners connect with you, whether it's on the investing side or, on maybe it's a real estate agent that's listening and they want to come talk to you and potentially, come work in the brokerage, maybe the location you're serving as well there? And
Sure. So many ways. On Instagram, you can find me at the Shannon Effect. That's with an A, which is action filled. You can certainly reach me by email, which is my name, Shannon @ and then it's wavre.com, WAAVRE.com. Happy to connect with anybody about real estate in any level. So would love to chat with any of you that have questions.
Amazing. Thanks again, Shannon. This was great. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Right on. Well, thanks for listening, guys, to another show here. If you liked it, please share and subscribe to the channel, where we are building a community of up-and-coming entrepreneurs. And remember, the fastest way to build wealth is to grow your business and invest in real estate. I love you guys. All the best.